Hi, I'm Carissa Wiley. Thanks for joining me here at Scrapbook.com. Today we're going to be jumping into the world of manual die cutting. We're going to take a closer look at the machines that we'll be using today, what comes with it, and show you exactly how to create your own die cuts. I'll be using the Sizzix Big Shot today. This machine comes with everything you need to create your own manual die cuts. When you open up your box, you'll find that your Big Shot comes with everything you need to get started. You'll find your multi-purpose platform as well as a pair of cutting pads. Now these Ocean Sparkle cutting pads are available only at Scrapbook.com, and they come in the bundle when you purchase the Big Shot, but you can also buy them separately. Sizzix also makes a wide variety of colors and sizes that you might find helpful for different types of projects. Now let's have a look at this multi-purpose platform. You'll notice that there are several tabs on your platform. This platform is designed to use with a lot of different types of tools that you can use in your die cut machine. And the nice thing about this platform is that all of your sandwich recipes are right here on the tabs. As you flip through, you'll find your sandwich recipes for embossing, texture plates, as well as the recipe for using with your silicone textures mat. So if you ever get confused while using this machine, you have all the instructions you need right on this cutting platform. Now today, we're going to be using wafer thin dies. When you're using wafer thin dies, you'll find it here on platform 2. Now Sizzix calls their wafer thin dies framelets. You can use any type of wafer thin dies in the Sizzix Big Shot. So when you're looking at dies, don't just look at Sizzix. There are a variety of companies that manufacture wafer-thin dies that are perfect for using with your Sizzix. Now let's talk about dies for a moment. What exactly is a die? A die is the tool that you're going to use in conjunction with your die cutting machine to create shaped pieces of paper. All of your dies, whether wafer-thin or steel rule, will have some sort of cutting blade exposed on them. In the case of these nesting circle dies, you'll see the cutting blade right here along the edge of this die. This is what presses into the paper and creates and cuts your shape. When you're using your dies, you want to make sure that your cutting blade is always facing towards the part of the paper that you want to show on your project. I like to think of my dies as cookie cutters. So when I'm placing my cookie cutter on cookie dough, I'm going to place it blade side down on the front side of my cookie dough. This is going to be the same thing when you're creating die cuts for your project. This will be especially important when you're using pattern papers and sentiment dies, because you don't want them to appear backwards on the front of your project. Now dies range anywhere from $5 to $50 depending on the size and type of the die. I recommend starting with some basic shapes and building up your collection from there. Things like hearts and stars, circles and flowers are all basic shape dies that you can use to create on any kind of project. They can also be combined together to create new looks. Every manual die cut machine will require you to put together what I like to call a die cutting sandwich. And like I mentioned before, our Sizzix Big Shot platform has the recipe for our sandwich right here. We're going to be using wafer-thin dies today, so I'm going to show you exactly how to build your sandwich and then run it through to create die cuts. I am going to start with my multi-purpose platform on the bottom, and building up from there, I am going to start with one cutting pad. From there, I'm going to take the desired die that I'm going to use and the paper and place them to where the die blade is kissing the side of the paper that I want to use. So in this case, this is not a double-sided pattern paper, but if it were, I would want to make sure that my die blade is kissing the part of the paper that I want to use. Now, I know that for this project, I am going to be cutting off the edge of this circle. So I can either position it to where my circle die is off the edge of my paper, or I can just run it through and cut it off at a later time. So I've started building my sandwich here. Once again, we've started with the multi-purpose platform on tab 2, our first cutting pad, our paper, our die with the blade kissing the paper where we want it to cut, and we're going to finish off our sandwich with our second cutting plate. Now our sandwich is ready to roll through the machine and create a die cut. So as we roll here, you're going to hear some cracking and some crackling sounds. That's completely normal. And you're gonna maybe have to use a little bit of muscle as you come across that die. That's okay. If you ever come to a point where there's a ton of resistance, you're gonna wanna stop. That means you haven't built your sandwich right and you could damage your machine. So as I roll through here, I am going to then take my sandwich out of the die cut machine, and you're going to see that I've created a perfectly cut circle image. Now this we'll use as a background on our card project. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside, and we're gonna do a little more die cutting before we start putting our project together. Now you'll also notice that you might see some cut marks in your cutting pad. This is completely normal. And as time goes on, these will get more and more cut marks. And eventually, this portion of your die cutting sandwich will need to be replaced. But this is completely normal. And the good thing is that you can change the colors or the size of your cutting pads depending on the type of project that you want to create. So we're going to continue die cutting shapes for our project. I have some nesting flower dies here that we'll be using, and I'm going to show you that you can cut several dies at one time. This will allow you to create a lot more die cuts in a shorter amount of time. Now you'll notice I talked about the die blade. These blades are not so sharp that you're going to cut yourself when you're handling those dies, so I don't want you to be afraid of that. These blades will cut when there is enough pressure applied to them to press through the paper. And I love manual dies because they create a beautiful finished edge on your project. I'm going to grab 4 of these different nesting flower dies here. These are an exclusive die set from Scrapbook.com, and I'm going to cut several of these at one time from various pattern papers. Now today I am using the pink paisley Turn the Page pattern paper 6x6 paper pad. And we're going to cut the center of our flower out of this beautiful pink pattern paper here. So once again, if you didn't get the hang of building that sandwich, we're going to build it up once again. I'm going to place the smallest flower shape onto my paper here. Once again, I'm making sure that the blade is touching the part of the paper that I want to show on my project. Now, in addition to cutting this flower, I also want to use this die here from Paper Smooches to create a banner for my die. So these dies come connected. You can either use a pair of die snips to snip these apart, or you can bend them apart at the tabs to separate them. I like to just leave them connected sometimes because it helps me to keep track of the complete die set. However, if you're limited on paper, you may want to go ahead and separate them so that you can use one die at a time. I'm going to place this banner onto my pattern paper with the blade side down, and I've created part of my sandwich here. Now I'm going to rotate my paper and I'm just going to slide it through just a little bit so that I can make room on this side of my plate for a few more die cuts. I am going to use this yellow textured cardstock. This is from the American Crafts Tropical Paper Collection, and I am going to cut 2 larger flowers from that. Now you'll notice that while I'm putting several dies and papers on here at one time, I'm creating the same basic sandwich. So once I have my dies positioned, I can go ahead and place my top cutting pad. Now you'll notice that this cutting pad I used on the bottom last time. It's okay, they're the same pad. You can use them on top, bottom, front, back, doesn't matter. Now that I have my sandwich built, I'm gonna go ahead and roll it through my die cut machine. Now, anywhere that there's a die, you're going to have some resistance, but go ahead and keep cranking through. Now, when I pull my cutting pads out of the die cut machine, I'm going to be left with several die cut images. I have my banner shape here, and this is actually an outline banner shape. I'll show you how to get that die cut out of that die in just a moment. You'll find this really small flower image here that I am going to be using in the center of the flower that I create. And I have my 2 larger yellow flowers here. A lot of times with these larger dies, you can just use your finger to pop it out of the die itself. Now you'll find on some of your more intricate die cuts that your die cut will get caught inside of the die as it's cutting. This is because of all the pressure that's placed on those dies when they're in the die cut machine. It's not a problem. I have this Spellbinders tool-in-one tool here, and it has this nice little kind of pokey end. Some dies will have these ejection holes. This die doesn't happen to have the ejection holes on the outside, which is the portion that I want to use. But I can just gently remove that die cut using the tool-in-one and pop it right out of the die. And now I have this beautiful, intricate banner shape to use on my project. Now we're not done die cutting yet. We're going to be using a sentiment die to create a sentiment for the front of our card project today. And I wanted to show you that these dies are powerful enough to cut through a couple layers of pattern paper at one time. I'll be using a couple of layers of textured cardstocks from American Crafts, and I'll be building my sandwich with 2 layers of paper instead of 1. I'm going to stack them directly on top of each other and then place my die on the paper. I'm going to complete my sandwich with the second cutting plate, and then I'm going to roll this through my die cut machine. And you'll see that I'm able to cut 2 of these sentiment die cuts at the very same time. The white one popped out with the die itself, and this one you can just use your fingers to pop right out of the paper. I'm going to place the tool-in-one right in this ejection hole here. I'm going to start the die cut out of the die and then just pull it right on out. With some of these more intricate sentiment dies, you want to be careful that you're not ripping them as you pull them out of the die. So here's a look at the project we're going to be creating today, but we're going to create it in a little bit different style. I'm going to be starting out with a pre-made card base. Now, pre-made card bases are available in a variety of colors from various manufacturers. These here happen to be the Pool Collection from Hero Arts. On this card, I used the lightest one. I think today we'll go ahead and use this medium color. So as I mentioned, we're going to be creating this card project here in a little bit different style. So I'm going to actually create a landscape card instead of a portrait card. I have all of my die cuts here ready to use and assemble on this card base. I'm going to start by adhering this circle onto my card base. I'm using a little bit of the Scrapbook.com tape runner adhesive to adhere this to my card base. I like to use a lot of adhesive. You probably don't need as much as I use. And I'm just going to line this up on my card base, making sure that the lines are going straight across my card. Once I've lined that up, I'll go ahead and press that down. I've also cut down a strip of this beautiful multicolor stripe pattern paper. This is also from the Pink Paisley Turn the Page 6x6 collection. And once again, I'm just going to use a little bit of tape runner adhesive on the back of this and adhere it to the front of my card. I'm going to put it kind of at the lower third of this circle that I've already positioned onto my card base. And once I have it in place, I'll go ahead and just push it down. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of excess hanging over my card. That's okay. We can just simply use a pair of scissors to trim that down. Now I like to trim from the back side. I just feel like I can get my scissors better aligned with the edge of the card. So I'll just turn this over and snip off the excess. So now I have my card base being built up. Now die cuts are great, and they're especially great when you can layer them up, and that's exactly what I'm going to do with these flower images here. You can see I have a variety of sizes and colors here that I'll be using to build up for my finished project. Die cuts can also be enhanced in many ways, and I'm going to show you an easy way to enhance and add a little bit of dimension to the edge of these die cuts. I have a little bit of yellow dye ink here. This is an ink pad. Generally, these are used for stamping, but they're great to take to die cuts and add a little bit of dimension along the edge. So I'm just going to take this ink pad and I'm going to rub it right along the edge of my die cut here. You're going to see how this deepens the color of that cardstock, and it will really help it pop off the finished project. So I'm just going to run this around. If you want it more intense, you can keep adding the ink and building it up. And you can see the difference between the one without the inking on the edge and the one with the inking on the edge. It's just a simple and easy way to add a little bit something extra to die cuts that are cut from plain cardstock. Now, another easy way to add a little bit of something extra to your die cuts is to use foam adhesive when adhering them together. This is going to add a little bit of dimension to your card and make it feel even more special. So I'm just going to take this smaller die cut here. I'm going to place a foam adhesive circle along the back of that, and I'm going to layer it on top of this larger die cut flower here. If you want to add these on with just some regular tape runner adhesive and skip the foam adhesive, it will create a flatter card that will be easier to mail. Now, another way to add a little bit of dimension to your die cuts is to kind of just curl up the edges. Now, on flowers in real life, they're not going to be flat, so I'm just taking my fingers here and just bending those edges up just a little bit and just creating some extra dimension. I'm going to finish up my layered flower with this pink flower right in the center. I'm going to adhere that on with just a little bit of tape runner adhesive right to the center. And then we'll go ahead and work on our sentiment grouping here. Now, I like to take sentiments and kind of layer them up. This is another easy way to take plain die cuts and add a little oomph to them. This is going to create a little bit of dimension. Now, I can either add the pool on top of the white, or I can add the white on top of the pool, which is what I've done in the original project here. I think today we'll switch it up and add the white along the bottom. And sometimes using a tape runner adhesive on these delicate die cuts can really tear at that paper. So this is a good place to use some liquid adhesive. I have the Nuvo glue pen here, and I'm just gonna add a little bit of liquid glue to the back of this die cut. I like to concentrate my glue into the areas at the ends of the letters so that I make sure that those really adhere well together. And once I have that all coated with the glue, I'm going to go ahead and just take this and position it right on top, slightly offsetting it from this white die cut. Now, these are exactly the same size. This isn't a shadow image, so this is really something that you could do with any die cut to create a little extra dimension. The other thing I like about liquid glue in this application is that I can kind of move it around a little bit if I didn't get it exactly where I wanted it the first time. So you can see I'm just kind of pushing that until the glue sets up and it will dry permanent. So I have my die cut here with just a little bit of a white shadow that's going to help it pop off the front of the card. You can see that this cardstock and this card base are very similar in color. So by having that little bit of white behind it, it will pop off the project. Now I'm going to layer this up with this banner die cut here, and because this is such a small and delicate die cut, once again, I'm going to use a little liquid adhesive along the bottom of these letters of this thanks sentiment, and I'm just going to layer that up, and we'll apply the entire thing onto the card front using a little bit of foam adhesive. Now, this is kind of delicate here, and in order to reinforce that bond between the die cuts, I'm going to go ahead and just layer some foam adhesive behind this. This is going to help keep that delicate die cut in place and also give it a little bit extra dimension on my card front. Now, had I used the die cut without creating the shadow behind the sentiment, this may not have been wide enough to add some foam adhesive behind. The foam adhesive might show on the finished project. So that's another benefit of adding a shadow behind your die cutting. Especially on these delicate dies like this. This is going to add a little bit more area for you to place adhesive. Now we can just remove the backers from these foam adhesive circles and place this onto our card project. Now, once I get all of the backer removed from the foam adhesive, I kind of have a mess on my work surface. I like to clean as I go, so I'm just going to use this little roll-away tool to pick up those little scraps and set that to the side. I can rinse that off later and it will be nice and clean for the next time I use it. Just going to place this onto my card front. I am going to position it where the banner is just a little bit below that strip of pattern paper that I placed earlier. And then I'm going to take my entire flower here and adhere it onto the front of my card. I'm going to turn those ends up just a little bit on that pool colored flower too. Slide that in behind my thanks sentiment. And then I can just finish this card off with a few accents. I'm gonna finish it off with some enamel dots from Echo Park, and I'm just gonna scatter them on the card, kind of like I have on this completed card project over here. I like to do things in threes. I just think it makes things look complete. So to finish off my flower, I have a lot of options. I can use things like enamel dots or Nuvo drops, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and use one of these domestic bliss brads from Simple Stories. I kind of like this pink one here, and I know I already adhered my flower onto my project, but I'm gonna just gently pull that up and place this brad in the center of my flower to complete my card. I'm gonna once again use this tool-in-one just to poke through all those layers of cardstock and foam adhesive that I've placed onto my flower. You could even do this before you put the upper layers on, but of course, we're gonna finish it off with it. I'll place that right in the center. I'll turn the back so you can see it covers up that pink layer a little bit. This one was a little bit smaller, Brad, so it allowed that pink layer to come out. But either way, I think this is a great finishing touch. Then I can just add my flower right back onto my project. And there you have it. A simple card using lots of die cuts. And you can see I achieved a really cool look by layering lots of die cuts on top of each other. These cards were created using some very simple and basic die shapes. These are things that you can use over and over again in your stash. And as I mentioned before, be sure you start out with things that you can use on lots of projects. Thank you cards are something that I send often, so that thanks die is the perfect addition to my collection, and I can see using it for lots of different projects. Thanks for watching today. I really enjoyed sharing this simple project with you, and I look forward to sharing more on your die cutting journey.